In Matthew chapter 20, verses at his right hand and his left, because they wanted to be great in his kingdom. Lots of people want to be great today, but in order to be great in Jesus' kingdom, we need to listen and obey what he says. If we want to be great in the kingdom of heaven, we must serve. Serve means to perform duties or acts for another person or organization. People will sometimes brag or lie to try to get a lot of money and for other people to call them great. But instead of doing these things, we need to try serving. If we want to be great in the kingdom of heaven, we must become a servant. Serving includes wiping, sweeping, mopping, elbow grease. In Matthew chapter 20, verses 27 through 28, Jesus talks about being crucified by saying, "The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many." Without his sacrifice, we would all be condemned. Now turn with me to John chapter 19, verses 28 through 30. John chapter 19, verses 28 through 30. And it reads, "Later, knowing that everything had been finished, and so that the scriptures would be fulfilled, Jesus said, 'I am thirsty.' And a jar of wine vinegar was there. So they soaked it in a sponge and put the sponge on a stalk of a hyssop plant and lifted it to Jesus' lips. When he had received the drink, Jesus said, 'It is finished.' And with that, he bowed his head and gave up his spirit." Now turn with me to Ephesians chapter 5, verses 1 through 2. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 1 through 2. And it reads, "Follow God's example, therefore, as dearly loved children, and walk in the way of love, just as Christ has loved us, and has given himself up for us as a fragrant offering and a sacrifice to God." This verse does not mean we have to be crucified, like Jesus was, in order to go to heaven, but we need to be willing. If we want to be great in the kingdom of heaven, we must follow the plan of salvation. We must hear, believe, repent, confess, and be baptized. And after we do these things, we still need to keep on serving Christ. We could try to be like a lot of people, like Jackie Robinson, Paul, or Martin Luther King Jr., since they are all very courageous. But why not try to be like the greatest person who ever lived, Jesus Christ? Why not serve as he did? Thank you.
In committing to stay with her mother-in-law Naomi and to help her after she lost her 2 sons, Ruth promised, "All that you say to me, I will do." This showed her commitment to her mother-in-law and her willingness to serve no matter the costs. We always need to serve. We cannot be Christians if we are unwilling to serve. Jesus served, but some of us may wonder why the Son of God came out of heaven and down to earth. Matthew 20:28 has the answer. And it reads, "Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many." Have you ever wondered why the Bible tells us over and over to serve one another? I will briefly try to answer each of these questions to help us each develop and maintain all that you say to me, I will do attitude. Jesus was spending time with his apostles after supper when he rose from the table, took a towel, girded himself with it, and started to wash the apostles' feet and to wipe them with the towel which he was girded. This was customary for a servant to do because it was very dirty work. Of course, back then they didn't wear sneakers, they wore sandals, and after a journey their feet would get very dirty. This was not a very likable job. John chapter 13, verses 13 through 16 read, "You call me teacher and Lord, and you say, well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example, that you should do as I have done to you. Most assuredly I say to you, the servant is not greater than his master, nor is he who is sent greater than he who sent him." This saying is very significant, because Jesus was their Lord and teacher, and greater than they were. However, he was the one to stoop down and wash his apostles' feet. The Ridgeway Bible Dictionary defines the word apostle as each of the chief 12 disciples of Jesus Christ. And the word disciple means follower. So the apostles were basically a special class of Jesus' followers. And like Jesus said, a servant is not greater than his master. And if Jesus was willing to wash his followers' feet, then they should be willing to wash each other's feet. This meant to the apostles that they needed to be humble while serving and act as though they were the least important. Application for us. How does this apply to us? Today this means for us that when we are teaching others about Christ, we need to make sure that we are not putting our emphasis on ourselves, but on Him. When people look at us and see that we live rightly, then we must tell them that it was not because of anything we did, but because of Christ. Today we do not literally wash each other's feet. There are many things I imagine most of us may not prefer to do certain. Some things most of us may not prefer to do to certain include staying after service, cleaning up after fellowship, cleaning up the little brother's messes, and even going out and preaching the gospel. We are serving Christ. But if we sacrifice, and if we make ourselves a servant, don't you think that people will see Christ in us? I think it is obvious that we cannot be like Christ without serving. If we want to be faithful to Christ, and if we want to be more like Him, then we will not get to do pleasant and convenient things all the time. Ruth 3 verse 5 reads, "All that you say to me, I will do." This was Jesus' attitude when it came to serving the Father, according to Matthew chapter 6, verse 39, which reads, "He went a little farther and fell on his face, saying, 'O my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will.'" If Jesus had this attitude to serve his Father, even if it meant he would be crucified on the cross, then I think that we should be willing to practically do anything to serve God. What do we learn from Jesus' example? We learn that we must be willing to leave all of our possessions, put our friends and family behind our backs, put others, especially Christ, before ourselves to follow Jesus. And it might not always be easy. We must sacrifice and do things that we may not prefer to do to follow Him. But that's what Jesus did, and that's what He expects us to do. So are you willing to follow Jesus and live a life of service? Thank you.